Good afternoon, guys. A very warm welcome to all of you in today's SUG session. So my name is Ankit Joshi, and I have around 5 years of experience, as Annie already mentioned. I started working with Sitecore 6.2, and then I was into some of the Sitecore 7 implementation, and then from last couple of years I am working on Sitecore 8. So I just want to share my knowledge and my understanding, my observations about MongoDB. So it's not like that I know everything about MongoDB. So whatever so far I have learned about MongoDB, I just want to share those knowledge with the community. And just in case if you have any feedback, any thoughts, or if you want to like check on something else, like just let me know. So let's start. So as part of today's session, so as you can see the agenda, we are basically going to cover the MongoDB in Sitecore. Basically, we're going to talk about MongoDB and how it works in Sitecore, which includes like why exactly we should go for Mongo, and what are the like scenarios or situations wherein like we should go for Mongo. So when to use, who is in the planet is actually using MongoDB as part of their enterprise solution. So that's something which you're going to look in brief, and then we are also going to cover about like the architecture of MongoDB, where exactly it sits in complete Sitecore ecosystem. So that's what another point which you're going to cover. Connection strings, like what are the different connection strings which comes with MongoDB and Sitecore. So that's also we are going to cover, and along with the description about all different connection strings there. And we're also going to cover about analytics database. And another thing which is not mentioned here, we are also going to cover in brief about what are the different deployment patterns we have when we talk about XDB deployments, right? So we are also going to cover the types of deployments present for MongoDB. So let's start with the introduction. So
Ankit, I'm sorry, a small thing to interrupt. I think on the left side bottom of your screen there's something open. Yeah, okay, thank you so much. That was blocking the video. Thanks.
Sure. Right. So basically, Sitecore introduced MongoDB from Sitecore 7, right? So basically, the main reason why actually Sitecore introduced MongoDB as part of their XDB component, right? So that's what we have to focus more into. So the major drawback was till Sitecore 7.5 what was happening was everything related to user, like if you talk about user details, right? It can be page visit, it can be campaign related information, it can be like personalization related details, and everything else. Everything was going into one analytics database. So that point of time, what was happening, like getting the actual reports was an issue, like and there was some performance issues also, right? So above, like, and one of the major reason why Sitecore introduced MongoDB was the scaling analytics, right? Because if you can see in the current system, in the current ecosystem of your Sitecore, if you see there is a way you can actually you can vertically scale your content management server, right? You can scale your content delivery servers, and you can scale your search engine as well, right? If you talk about Solar, so there is a way like you can scale our content management server, delivery server, and search engine. But what about like if you talk about scaling our analytics? So till 7.5 there was no way you can scale your analytics. So that's what the main reason of adding MongoDB as part of their experience analytics, as part of their XDB. We'll go into more details, but that was one of the major reason why MongoDB came into picture. Still 7.5, like Sitecore, we were using the terminology for DMS, like it was digital marketing system. But from Sitecore 7.5, it was all introduced to Sitecore experience database and experience marketing. So that was shift from DMS to experience marketing that happened with the introduction of Sitecore 7.5. For MongoDB, so why exactly we have to go for Mongo, right? So we'll go into more details MongoDB with Sitecore, but specifically for MongoDB, it's an open source, right? It's NoSQL and it's document-oriented database. So open source, when we talk about open source, right, it's very easy to customize that software based on our business requirement, right? So there is nothing like we have to it's very flexible, right? It's not like we can actually change everything on the fly. It's not like we we have to be very specific about our schema or something like that, right? Everything is very flexible. So that is one of the major advantage of going with for MongoDB. It's no SQL. You don't have to worry anything about like any relationship. Like if let's say if you're talking about your users and that user has some relation with some different other objects, right? So initially with RDBMS, like we have to have those different objects, then we need to have that relation between these two entities, right? But with the introduction of MongoDB, as it's NoSQL, everything can be added in just one document, right? So we can just have one document which will have everything related to that user, and if there is any we need any mapping details which is actually not there in the same user profile, we can also add those details directly in that profile directly. So we don't need any mapping to have like which was actually which view like that's how the RDBMS works, right? So that is also one of the reason it made all the organization very much simple. So primary use of MongoDB was like just collecting the user information. When we talk about user information, it can be anything, right? So it can be like contacts. It can be like who is actually accessing from which device, from which location they're accessing, which customer data, right? Events, goals, or anything like that, right? So basically our intention using MongoDB is to provide personalized user experience to all our end users, right? So that made possible with MongoDB. So with MongoDB visitor and their interaction, but we were directly updating everything on the collection DB, and in that collection DB everything was there in a JSON format. So there are some set of fields which comes by default with for which is like by default comes with profile, but just in case if you want to add some more details on that, we can add those details directly as part of that profile. So and that complete format is a JSON format, which so once we have everything on your collection database, right, it can be your user related information, and it's not specific to only your user related information. There can be some other things also which you can do with MongoDB, right? So by default out of the box, in MongoDB we normally works with context, right? But there is some if you have some custom requirements, then like we have to have some other collections maintained for some other reason, those things also we can add here. So it's not specific to only customers, but as of now we are just talking we are talking in context of customers. So and then once we have everything on our collection database, that is in our context collection, then using reporting pipeline we can just processing server, we can just process everything from your collection database to your analytics database. So basically in MongoDB with Sitecore there are two things involved. First is your collection database, which is nothing but your MongoDB, and second is your reporting database, which is your SQL database, right? So what happens is whenever any visit happen, any interaction, any visit or any goals, information will be updated directly to your custom database first. From custom database, using processing pipeline, it will go to your analytics database, and from analytics database, like using our reporting pipeline, we can just display all that information into like some other interfaces like experience profile, experience analytics, or any experience manager or WFFM, right? So that's how the flow will go from collection database to analytics database, and from there to reporting. So that's how actually the complete flow will happen. Yeah. So another question is like why Sitecore XDB is using MongoDB, right? So that's another important question. So first thing is scalability. So I want to talk more about scalability, which we have in coming slides we'll talk more about it. But scalability is one of the reason we go for MongoDB, right? So scalability, so in general, what is scalability, right? Scalability is something like we are trying to distribute our system. If we are trying to like diversify, it's not just, we are not trying to mess up everything in just one system, right? Because just in case if something goes wrong, there is no way we can just update or upgrade just one component of that Sitecore solution, right? So that's how we try to like diversify our system, so that each component has its own server, so that we can actually upgrade, or if something goes wrong, we don't have to mess up in different components of the same solution. We'll go into more details of that. So standalone environment is one way we can scale it. Vertical scaling also we are going to cover. Horizontal scaling. Performance is very important factor in MongoDB. So performance and sharding is two more features which comes with MongoDB, and I want to cover performance and sharding in specifically more. Flexibility, right? So flexibility and unstructured data and schemas are like it goes simultaneously, like side by side, because you don't have to strictly follow schema, right? So it's not like, because if you go for the SQL, in case if you want to make some adjustment, if you want to update something, if you want to add some more fields, you have to define that schema first. Without defining that schema, you just can't do anything with SQL. But with the introduction of MongoDB, and specifically in Sitecore, if you want, if for your profile, if you want to add some more field, if you want to add some more details for that profile, you can easily do that. So you don't have to, the deployment of your Mongo is very easy if you're going with this approach, right? So deployment of the changes with every sprint is very important, like is very easy with introduction of MongoDB. So flexibility, unstructured data, right? So it's not following a specific structure, right? You can just change your structure on the fly, right? So those things also we are going to cover. So if you talk about in brief, the advantages: scalability, performance, flexibility. Flexibility is again related to your dynamic schemas. So let's talk more about scalability. So there are three types of scalability can exist. So standalone environment is something which is very specific for your local environment, right? So we are not talking about vertical scaling or horizontal scaling. So standalone environment is ideally we cannot say that our standalone environment is scaled, right? Because we have, so the complete Sitecore solution we have in the same system, in the same server. So if you talk about your content delivery server, or your content management server, or your processing server, or your reporting server, your Solar server, everything is there in one system. So there is no way, if you want to upgrade just one component of your system, you just can't do it, because everything is just one system. But this is optimal environment for your development, right? Because development, you don't want to increase the cost of your development environment, right? So that's how the standalone environment is there, which is actually no scale, because everything is there in one machine. If you talk about vertical scaling, yes, so vertical scaling is something like most of the organization and most of the clients which I have seen is they are actually going in a combination of vertical scaling as well as horizontal scaling, right? So in terms of Mongo, so now, before Sitecore 7.5, there was no way you can actually vertical scale it, right? But now actually, as you have a different server for your Mongo, for your analytics, you can scale that as well, right? So when we talk about the vertical scaling, it means we are basically more concentrating increasing the capacity of that specific component. So if we feel that, okay, no, the RAM size, the hard disk size of your content delivery or your collection database, that in turns is MongoDB is not up to date or up to mark, then we can take the decision and upgrade that component software itself, right? So that's how vertical scaling will help us in like giving like better results. So in this diagram, if you see, we can scale our content delivery server, we can scale your session shared server, we can scale your collection database, which is nothing but your MongoDB, processing server, reporting database, and content management server. So this is what vertical scaling goes. Another very important thing is horizontal scaling. So in horizontal scaling, so content management scaling was there in place, content delivery scaling was there in place, Solar scaling was there in place. But what about analytics scaling, right? Because nowadays, if even I have worked with some of the clients where like they want to scale their analytics, right? And as per the latest infrastructure strategy, what basically the client is going for is they're scaling their Mongo servers in different servers, right? So it's not like they're not focused only on upgrading hardware or software of that just one server. They want to scale their Mongo server as well, just to make sure they have 100% availability all the time. And how they can make sure that the interaction of basically the data flow of their user-led information is all in place all the time. That's how they can do using replica set. So we'll go into more details about the replica set, but when we talk about MongoDB with Sitecore, horizontal scaling is something that we have to always keep in mind, that horizontal scaling is something that is introduced using replica set, wherein like we'll be having, like, we have content delivery server, right? Content delivery server 1, and we'll have content delivery server 2. In the same way, when we talk about Mongo server, we basically go for that is a typical approach. We basically create 3 different servers: one Mongo server, second Mongo server, and third Mongo server. And first Mongo server will act like your primary repository for reading and writing all your information related to your context, and your secondary, and then you left with your 2 more Mongo servers that act like a secondary data source for you. So at all point whenever we are trying to read something or whenever we are trying to write something in your collection database, everything will go via primary Mongo server. But there is a way, like if something goes wrong, then how basically Mongo takes care of all the stuff, will cover in the next coming slides. So that's how the horizontal scaling in Mongo servers helps business and clients to make sure that their user data information is always available, and that too they have some performance improvements there, because rep, uh, replica set along with sharding are two things like that goes simultaneously side by side, because replica set helps in making sure that the application is available all the time, means the data flow of the contact related information is always happening. Plus, at the same time, we also have to implement sharding, which will help to make sure that the performance of your application is also in place. It's not like that, okay, no, the application is available, the data flow of the user is happening fine, but we also have to make sure the application is available. There is no disconnect, definitely, but the performance also we have to consider, right? So sharding basically helps in improving the performance of your Mongo server. So we'll go into more details about that. So when we should definitely use MongoDB, so that's I think we are mostly covered. So it's basically based on our users, right? If our target audience is like, we want to track, okay, no, from where exactly we are getting more traffic, based on location, based on like user preferences, based on like what search keywords they are giving, what is the behavior, like which page they are visiting, which page they are spending more time. So right, so when behavior, traffic, inputs, audience, so basically these are few things which goes simultaneously, it goes side by side. We cannot say like just behavior or just traffic. These are the things which are like very tightly coupled with each other. So when we have these type of scenarios, when like we are focusing more into the user behavior, because we want to, as an organization, we want to provide a user like we want to provide them an experience based on their preferences, right? So that's what, if you are targeting that personalized look and feel based on our website visitor, that's something we have to consider MongoDB. So in that point, behaviors, traffic, inputs, and input is something like, let's say we want to know more about our users, right? So we can have some forms or something else where like we ask user that, okay, no, we'll ask for their preferences, we ask for some more details on that. So, and once they save all those details, we can save all those details into collection database, and then the business owners, right? So they can actually using our processing services, the information from collection database will go to analytics database, and from analytics database, using our reporting services, it will go to the reporting, right? It can be experience analytics or experience profiles. So from there, the business owners can take according, like they can take the decisions based on what information they are getting back from users, right? So if our business is more into like more engaged with users, that's where something we have to go for MongoDB implementation, and that's how it works best with Sitecore. That's why Sitecore has actually introduced it out of the box. Right, so as of now, who is using MongoDB? So I don't want to go into more details of that, because this is something I have just taken directly from mongodb.com. So but these are some of the names like Forbes, MetLife, and Facebook. They're using for their enterprise business solution, they are using MongoDB, and they are like big names, right? It's not like some small companies, so they are big names. So there is a reason like why these companies are actually going for, why actually they're using MongoDB as part of the enterprise solutions. And if you go to mongodb.com, you'll come to, like, if you click on any of these clients over there, Foss, Bosch, Facebook, and MetLife, or any other thing, you'll get more details, like which part of their business actually they are using MongoDB. So if you want to just explore more about these companies and which part of the system MongoDB is using for them, you can just explore it. So architecture of MongoDB, right? So that's something I just want to focus in this slide and next slide. So where exactly, when we talk about the MongoDB architecture, right? So initially, like before Sitecore 7.5, there was no concept of scaling of analytics, right? It was just everything was dumping into one SQL database, and then we were just using our reporting services. We were just getting it back to experience profile and analytics, means our reporting services. But now with the introduction of MongoDB, right? So what MongoDB is, where exactly MongoDB sits in the complete Sitecore solution ecosystem, right? So where exactly it sits? It sits before, like after content delivery server, right? Because ultimately the user interaction or personalization or any campaign, that's happening in content delivery server, right? So that sits after content delivery server, and before and before like because and before your reporting database, because ultimately uh, whatever information you have in your collection database, that has to go to your analytics database, right? That is a SQL based database. So that sits in between your content delivery server. From there it will take all the information, take the interactions, contacts, personalization, goals or campaigns, anything from the content delivery server, gets everything posted to your collection database, and from there it goes using the processing server, it goes everything to reporting database. So that's how actually it sits in between. And in this screen, if you see, right, so we have this content delivery server, we have collection database server, right? So which is again Mongo based, NoSQL database, processing servers, then we have SQL, right? So this processing server will take all the information from collection and post it to SQL here, right? And then once we have all the information in our analytics database, which is a SQL database, using a reporting service, right? So we have some reporting services, some pipelines, which basically gets all the data into a specific format, which is used for these applications like experience analytics, experience profile, web form for marketers module, and experience manager, right? So these are some of the interfaces wherein like we need the details which are actually captured in your SQL database. So that's how the complete flow will go. And collection database is basically mainly used for getting the user information, right? So that is one of the reason. You can also use MongoDB as part of your session state server, right? So you can configure your session state server also using MongoDB. So that's also one of the feature, like you can use MongoDB. Another thing here is like yeah, so let me go to next slide, right? So we have replication and sharding, right? So as it was I mentioned in the very first slide of this presentation, that we are trying to come up with a plan of like scaling our analytics, right? So it's all about scaling, right? So analytics can be there. So we're not very much focused on, okay, no, that there is a problem with analytics. Because analytics was there already inside before 7.5 also, but our major concern was scaling that analytics, right? So how we can better scale our analytics so that it has maximum uptime and it has maximum performance. So that's what our major concern should be. So in order to deal with that problem, we have this replication and sharding. So what replication basically it will do is, here we basically make use of horizontal scaling, right? So we're not just focused on upgrading just one server, right? We are just not focusing on one server. What rather we are doing here is we are actually doing like horizontally we are scaling our analytics, right? So by that, what I'm trying to say is, we have one Mongo server, we will have another Mongo server 2, we have another Mongo server 3, right? And all these three servers will be used as your these all three are will have your Mongo's all the data of your Mongo, all user related information, everything will be there in all three servers. But what happens here is, your first server, right? So first server will act like your primary, like your primary data source for fetching or reading or updating your user related information. So everything related to user interaction, everything related to your let's say any campaigns user has interacted, right? So all this information will go directly to your primary source here, right? In this case, it's the MongoDB server 1. So here exactly everything will go. But what happens here is, internal Mongo process will take care, or will make sure that whatever information we have in the primary source, everything will get copied to other servers as well. So here, if you see, this is primary, this is secondary, and this is secondary, right? So let's say if we have like maybe like 100 MB of user related information, so that 100 MB of information will be there in this server, plus in Mongo server 2, plus in Mongo server 3, right? So but any interaction, so if you want to access some user related information, we will do directly from primary source and not from the secondary sources, right? Still we have the same data present in other two servers also, but our primary source will be your primary, like the server 1. Now let's take an example that something goes wrong with Mongo server 1. That's where even vertical scaling will also go down, right? Because vertical scaling, we are just trying to upgrade our one server, but what happens if that complete server is down? So in this case, what happens if MongoDB server 1 is down for some reason, right? It can be anything. It can be hardware failure, it can be software failure, or something like that. In Mongo process, what internal Mongo process will take care of. So let's say in this case, primary server is down, right? So now we left with secondary 1 and secondary 2. So internally it will decide at which secondary has to act like a primary source now, right? So in this case what happens is we have like secondary 1 and secondary 2. This is secondary 1 and secondary 2. What happens is if this server gets failed, one of these two servers will act like a primary source and one server will act like a secondary now. This is still not in place, so we can completely ignore the first server now. We left with two. This will act like a primary and this will act like a secondary now. Now what happens, as this is now considered to be a primary source of all our contact related information, all the requests, anything we are reading, anything we are writing will happen directly in the second DB server 2 now. So this will become the primary and this will become the secondary now, right? And whatever interaction this we are updating in this primary source, everything will get copied to secondary 2 server also now. So that way also, so that way basically we are trying to make sure that for some reason if one of the server gets failed, right, the reason can be anything, right? So we don't want to go into more details of that. Reason can be anything, but if one server is down, other servers can take care of all our requests, right? It can be a read related operation or it can be write related operation. So that is the one very important reason that we should, whenever we are planning or whenever we are into discussion about designing that, okay, no, what should the strategy for our MongoDB, right? From the deployment standpoint, we should definitely consider all these factors. How much important our Mongo data is for us. If we feel that, okay, no, because I have seen some of the clients, like they will go for, because we now have Sitecore 8, right? So they'll go for Sitecore 8 implementation, but maybe the Mongo data is not that important for them. So at that point of time, we don't have to go for this type of horizontal scaling approach, right? We can just go for vertical scaling, but still we should go for vertical, even though if they are not going for, even though if the Mongo data is not important for them, but still it's our responsibility. I think we should tell them that they should scale their analytics database, because down the line, we don't know that any point of time they may use their Mongo data, right? They may use their user related information. But if certain cases, if they are not at all worried about their Mongo data, they are not at all worried about their user related information, their interaction, it's better we don't have to go for the horizontal scope, but rather go for vertical scaling. But now I think it's clear that why exactly the replication is more important along with the horizontal scaling, because that way we'll make sure if something goes down, the data is still available. So that way we'll make sure that data is 100% available. So availability is one of the reasons. So MongoDB provides high data availability with replica set. So basically this complete thing, right? So this complete thing will form a replica set. So each replica set will have its, like, it has the same copy of data. So it's not, we are not saying that each replica set has its different copy. The copy is always same, but the only thing which matters is for source actually we are using for reading and writing our information. That's how actually it differs. But this is a complete set, and replica set consists of 2 or more copies of the data, so that the data is always going to be same. Now another thing is sharding. So ideally, in an ideal infrastructure diagram of your Sitecore solution, replication and sharding should go side by side. We cannot say that let's go just for replication and don't configure sharding, right? Because ideally, by means of horizontal scaling, you can make sure that your application is always up. Your data flow is always happening as expected. That's fine. Everything looks good, fine. But you also have to make sure what is the performance of your application, right? So when we talk about the performance, that's where the sharding comes into picture, right? So what basically happens in sharding is, you can relate this sharding is just like creating a new custom index, because in Sitecore, if you go, there are some indexes we get by default, right? So we have Sitecore master index, we have Sitecore web index, we have Sitecore core index, we have all these different indexes, but still we create our custom index, right? So why basically we create custom index? We create our custom index which points to a specific location and which has its own template ID defined. So that way we are just trying to instead of querying from some 100 GBs of data, we are just trying to make sure that whatever is relevant for us, we just query from there, right? So that's where we are trying to optimize ourselves by introducing another custom index. In the same way, in sharding also, this is what happens. So sharding, what happens is, we have these 3 replica sets, right? We have this replica set 1, we have replica set 2, and replica set 3. Now what happens is, for every replica set, let's say our total size is like maybe 1 GB. Let's take an example of 1 GB. So what happens is, instead of querying 1 GB, we'll just divide that 1 GB into separate small chunks of data. Like we can have like 100 MB of 100 MB one, we can create like, so like 100 MB we can have 10 different small data sets. So what happens is, and that which chart it has to access, that's again MongoDB will take care. So we don't have to check anything on that, right? So it's up to MongoDB who takes care of like that. Which if MongoDB find that these are the different charts which is available as part of this replica site, it will take care. That this chart it has to check, this chart it has to check, and let's take an example like, and MongoDB always make sure that the sharding is always in equal across your replica set. So it's not like your one replica set has 5 different small chunks of data, and then your remaining 2 servers or 3 servers, based on your configuration, it has some 1 or 2. So right, that's always MongoDB will take care of like how it has to distribute those shards across all your replica set. Not let's take an example. In this screenshot, we have one server as a primary, then we have 2 and 3. Let's say we added one more server as a secondary server right there. And what this happens is, if whenever we are trying to add one more set there, right? Let's say whenever we added another Mongo server, so initially if we have like 9 different charts created across 3 different servers, it will try to make sure that the balance is all common, all equal in all different 4 servers. So instead of having 3 shards assigned for one physical server, it will actually create 2 different shards, right? So that's how actually it will make sure that the shards are also equal across all your servers. So in an ideal environment, replication along with sharding should go simultaneously side by side. That's the only way we can make sure that our application is always available, it's always up, plus it's also performance optimized. So we cannot say like, okay, no, we just go for only sharding or just go for only application. That's a typical standard or typical approach which we should follow. Next is connection string. Right, so connection string, this is like typical connection string which comes out of the box when you install MongoDB, right? We don't have to install, basically it comes by default. So by default we have analytics, then we have then we have like analytics.live, and then we have like analytic tracking.history, right? And then we have tracking.mongo. So basically this is the typical conventions. Like we have name, we have to define that connection string name for this, and this is the analytics, right, which basically deals with all our context related information. MongoDB is a prefix which you have to add. So right, so in this case it's MongoDB, the prefix is there, then / we have that localhost. So localhost points at which environment we are looking for. So if it is local, it will always localhost along with your port number, and then your database name, right? So if in this case it's sample Sitecore analytics, it means we are actually we are targeting our analytics database, analytics Mongo database, which mainly talks about your interactions, your contacts, your locations data, and so forth, right? So that's where this is one of the critical connection string you should have. Then we have tracking.live, right? So tracking.live is something, basically we need this tracking.live like when we have like when we check more into like goals, campaigns, personalization, right, visits. So that's where we need this tracking.live connection string. Tracking.history is required. Let's say in NextDB we are talking about 2 different databases, right? We are talking about collection database in one side, and we are talking about analytics database in the another side. So ideally, in an ideal workflow, whatever information you have in your collection database, right, everything related to user, like page visits, interactions, everything is there in collection database. Same set of information should go to your analytics database also, and from there it will go to the reporting. But there can be some scenarios wherein like whatever information you have in your collection database is not in sync with your reporting database, right? And if your collection database is not in sync with your reporting database, ultimately your interface, like which is responsible for generating your reports, like experience profile, experience analytics, those will not be accurate, right? So we always have to make sure that most of the time it will be accurate, but there can be some scenarios where you'll see that the data is not in sync. So how we can do that, how we can make sure that the data is always in sync across these 2 different databases, is to is to rebuild your indexes. And to have the, before you rebuild your indexes, you need to have this tracking.history, and there is another connection string you need for that one is secondary reporting analytics.secondary. So that's where these two connection string you need to make sure that whenever you feel that the data is not in sync from your collection database and your analytics database, you need to rebuild your indexes, and that's where you need this tracking.history connection string plus analytics.secondary thing, which is again related to your SQL database. Another connection string which we have here is tracking.contact, which is again related to contact related information. But there is one more thing. If you see here, right, we have, so here if you see, like, we are just targeting one server. So in this case it's just localhost, right? Why it is localhost? Because I'm targeting my local machine, right? But what about if you're trying to connect to a QA server or staging server or UAT or production or something like that, then we just need to replace this localhost with the actual server name there. So that's what we need to make that change. And the beauty of the Mongo connection string is you don't have to create those database explicitly. Once you had a MongoDB installed in your solution, in your local or in any of the distributed environment successfully, you just need to define the connection string name, and once you run your application, automatically it will create all these collections for you. So you don't have to create those things. You don't have to create these collection database explicitly. So what about the replica? What about the replica set? So in replica set we talked, right? So that sorry, the spelling is incorrect here, but replica set basically we promote when we're talking about horizontal scaling our application, right? So when we talk about multiple servers has like Mongo server installed on it. So what for that, if you want to support MongoDB as a horizontal scaling with replica set, so this is what we should do basically. So MongoDB, we have server 1, which by default acts like a primary Mongo server for you, then comma your server 2 and comma your server 3, along with that which collection you're trying to make it as a which collection basically you're targeting. And then you also need to define your replica set name, so right, because every replica set name should have a name. So the replica set name you have to define here. So right now I've just done it for session just to make sure that I can leverage MongoDB as my session state provider, but the same replica set you can configure for your analytics, for your tracking live, for your tracking history, and for your tracking contact. But this is just an example that if you're going for single server analytics approach and for your replica set. So this is for replica set and this for just single server. Okay, so let's focus on some of the tables here. So we're talking about contacts, right? So everything related to, so these are the so this is my contact, right? So in the right hand side, if you see, we have identifiers, right? So identifier, system, personal, email, phone numbers, and addresses, right? So these are some of the fields which comes by default, which comes out of the box with MongoDB. So you don't have to do anything with that, right? So these are things which by default come. Like identifier, basically what identifier is, how to identify that specific contact. Means we can identify a contact by maybe by an email, right? It can be an email, or it can be any GUID which is assigned by some third-party system, right? Some XYZ GUID we can assign. So basically identifiers are used to identify a particular contact in its own way. Plus we have some personality information, right? So we have first name, surname, nickname, and gender, right? So this is something like we can define, and this comes by default. Emails also, if you want to have some emails, so in this case if you see it gets updated to my personal email address, zip code, so everything we can customize, right? So this view is the standard view, right? I have not changed anything on that one. But if you want to customize your profile, right, you want to add some more details to your profile, that okay, no, for this profile I want to add some more information, that okay, no, I want to add, let's say in my front end for a specific user, I have some specific form created, I have a page created wherein I'm looking for some more information from user, that get me your preferences, get me your location, or get me your something, right? It can be anything. So wherein I'm trying to get some more details from user. So all those details will not get saved into a collection database out of the box, right? So you have to create your own facet by which you can actually update that information to collection database, which in turn gets back to your analytics database. So that is one of the agenda item which we are going to cover in our next session next month, where like I'm going to show how you can create your own facet to extend your profile card, right? So but this is the default view. In the same screen, if you see, we have this db.get collection and contact, and we can also do some filters there, right? So we can do a filters using .find, when like I'm trying to filter all my contacts whose first name is Ankit, right? So that's why we'll cover more into our next session. But MongoDB basically is very rich. You can filter it using your name, like to granular to any level you can filter, right? So you can filter it using addresses, email, personal information, identifiers, right? And if you have extended your profile with some additional parameters or some additional properties, you can filter it by those fields also. It's not like you can filter it by the only field which comes by default with that profile. It's not like that. You can do it with your external properties also, right, which gets added using some extension. So next is, this is one the collection which comes in the analytics database, that is interaction. So in interaction, what happens is, like as an user, as an own, like as a business decision maker, I want to understand, like, okay, no, like what type of interactions we are doing. Like if you want to check that which user and which page he is visiting, what is the start time, what time he ended, what time he came to the system, what time he left, what for which user we want to check, right? So we have this contact ID as well. We want to check based on language, based on location. So everything related to user user interaction, whatever he's doing in the system, everything will be updated to interaction collection table in your Mongo. And that's where we can actually get into more details, like how to filter it and all those things we can do. So that is, just want to cover only contacts and interactions for now. Another thing is regarding deployment, right? So deployment is another very important key factor okay, no, we can implement our solution. We can make sure that, okay, no, whatever things we have to read, we can read it properly. Whatever we have to write to your profile or any custom things, we can do it. So, but we also have to think about what type of deployment strategy we are planning for, right? And that's not something like that should happen at the end of the project. That should happen right on the very first day. That what is your deployment strategy for your XDP, right? So let's cover some of the deployment strategies for XDB. So there can be like on-premise and on cloud, right? So there can be two things. Like either you can deploy your XDB directly on premise, like you don't have to worry about any cloud service which will basically host your XDB components, and or you can basically rely on some AWS services or some cloud which is basically backed up by Azure services. So it can be a combination. Either it can be completely on-premise or it can be completely cloud, right? Or depending on your requirement, it can be a combination of on-premise or cloud, because there may be like, right, when we talk about content management server, right? So content management server is something, it's important for us, right? Because that's where we are doing all our content entry. But what matters most is content delivery server, right? So in this case, maybe we can example is like we can put content management server in on-premise, but maybe we can put content delivery servers on cloud, right? Because that has some advantage, right? So because we don't have to worry about anything about the infrastructure, it will be always up, right? So it depends. Like basically, on-premise has some advantage, disadvantage. Cloud has some advantage or disadvantage. But in general, on-premise will have like more control. We know, like, because that's completely owned by us. We know what is the data center for it. That's owned by completely us. We can control the hardware. We can control the network. We can completely control the security and everything, because that's our data center that we are using for deployment. And it will be always available, right? If you're going with on-premise and if you're targeting horizontal scaling, and it's horizontal scaling for our analytics, that will be always available. Whereas on cloud, it's powerful, right? Scalable and fully managed. We don't have to do anything on that, right? It's very easy. Like if we are planning to deploy our solution somewhere in cloud, the only thing which we have as a user we have to focus is just implementing it right? So whatever features or whatever things, the actual feature work is there, we just need to focus on that thing, and deployment wise, everything, let the third party takes care of it, right? But at the same time, we cannot say let the third party take care of everything, because there are some considerations when we are moving to cloud, because then you have to see like, okay, no, how your data reading, how your data writing is happening, because that has a different on, that works differently on cloud and that's work differently on premise. Then it has low cost, globally available at Azure locations, and recoveries, right? So recovery is something like there's, let's say if we are planning, we are doing it on premise and something happened, right? Some natural calamity or something happened, right? So anyways, that is always applicable for cloud also, but in general way, that's provide you a robust recovery. So that is also one of the thing which we should focus, like right from the starting, that what is our deployment strategy for our XDB, either it's on premise or cloud or a combination of both, right? It can be both. Right, so I think that's it for today's session, and I think next session, as I already mentioned, that we'll be covering more into like how you can add, update data into Mongo, and how you can work with your collection, and how you can create new facet, how you can add new features, new properties, right? So that's what we are going to cover in next session, which I'm going to work with Annie. Yeah, pretty much that's it. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, blog. This is my email address and phone number. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and if not, then definitely we can follow it via LinkedIn or Twitter. Any?
Yeah, thanks Ankit for it was very informative, especially when we talked about the horizontal and vertical scaling. That was very useful. I think one of the most important aspect we should discuss, or we should focus on, is like security at the MongoDB, especially when you are doing kind of on-premises mode implementation.
Right. Yes.
I'm sure that you all might be aware that in January 2017, around 27,000 MongoDB instances were hacked, and few of them I came to know that few of those particular instances, there were few Sitecore implementations as well from there, like especially the MongoDB instances were hacked. So fortunately, for the same time, we were working on implementing the MongoDB from our current client, which is basically a health insurance client. And when you are like work for a client like health insurance, they used to save their PHI data into the MongoDB as well. So yeah, so if you go for on-premises mode for the MongoDB, it's must to have to implement the SSL for your MongoDB. Now Sitecore, so Sitecore doesn't provide out of the box for the SSL implementation, so we did a kind of customization to introduce SSL in MongoDB, both at the connection string as well as the Sitecore MongoDB pipeline. I also wrote down a kind of blog on my site sitecorecompetencies.wordpress.com. If anyone is interested to know that how the SSL, how SSL is implemented, then you can refer that blog. Only one question I have, which is specifically for the WFFM module. Now, WFFM module gives us a scope to either use MongoDB or go within a standard SQL database, which was there onto the 7.2. I understand that if a particular client is not using the Sitecore XDB at all, they have this facility to still use the WFFM module using the SQL server. But apart from that, does anyone have any experience of like why to use SQL for WFFM? What are the different case studies or scenarios they have worked on, or it's always good to use Mongo for the WFFM module?
Right. So Amitabh, like basically, as per my understanding and my experience, like so far we have used WFFM directly with SQL and not with Mongo. But yeah, I've came across with some of the requirements where like clients wants all their web form related information directly into MongoDB as well. Wherein like that's one of the things which we are looking. So out of the box, everything will go directly to SQL, but we are planning to do some customization wherein like all their web form related information is also stored in custom data. So in MongoDB collection data. So that's what the customization we're planning to build for. But out of the box, we have not done directly something. We are not saving straightforward anything directly to collection. It's still we are using like SQL for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. That's all from my side.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any more questions for Ankit?
Oh, yeah, this is Umesh. I have a small question like we have contact a table in the collection. So is there any way to encrypt the data which is going into that table?
Umesh, I have to look into it because as of now we have not encrypted anything. So might be there will be a way, but I'm not that clear. So I can definitely check into that and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Good.
Yeah. Okay, I think we are good.
Great. If anyone has any other questions and would like to take it offline, please feel free to reach out to Ankit in all the channels that he's mentioned here on the slide. And we'll have a follow-up session like Ankit mentioned sometime in April, and we're going to announce that shortly along with the agenda. So it'd be really great if all of you could join as per your feasibility as well. And thank you everyone for joining the session today. And just a small reminder again for the in-person meetup, if anyone has any ideas or they're interested in presenting, please feel free to reach out to me. Yeah, that's it. Thanks a lot. Thank you everyone for joining.